Hi again, everyone. My name is Aini Hazwani. You can just call me Aini. Previously, I studied in UKM. Also, I took degree in TESOL. So now I'm back in UKM taking masters in literature.
I mean, which cohort? I don't remember teaching you. So, which cohort? What year did you graduate?
Just freshly graduated the last year's batch.
Okay, cool. Nurul Shahira Raszaili.
Hi everyone, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Shahira. You can just call me Shahira or Shah for short if that's long for you. I think I graduated my degree last 2 years, so it's a fresh new start for me.
What did you graduate with? What was your first degree?
Creative writing in UITM.
Creative writing.
Yeah.
So you write short stories, poems, novels. What do you write?
We do a lot of script writing as well. But yeah,
Theatre.
a lot, not a lot of literature, but we had like 2 or 3 classes of literature. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, Uzla.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Fuzla Bushra binti Muhammad Khairuddin. You can call me Fuzla. I graduated in 2018 in UIE with a degree in English language and literature.
Come back, Fuzla. Nice to see you again. Dong Lai or Alice. Go ahead.
Hello everyone, I'm Ren Donglai and I'm from China. You can call me Alice also. And I graduated from Hainan University last year and I majored in business English for my bachelor degree. And I'm from northeast of China. And Kasi is it's cold now, and Kasi, yeah, and the US snowed maybe last week. Yeah,
Thank you
that's
so
all.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Salim. Salim, we can't hear you. Salim, we cannot hear you. Is my mic off? Okay. All right.
Do we want to like put it in the chat or something?
Can you try again, Salim? When you all logged in, did you have to click any button like audio on or anything like this? You had to, right? Because okay. All right, Salim, I think he's going to join us again.
Yeah, I think he's trying to rejoin.
I still cannot hear you. Or we can't hear you at all.
Yes.
Not even clearly, not at all. Okay, Salim, can you hear me? You can hear me, all right?
Oh, yes.
So if you want to ask a question or make a comment, please use where is the chat button? Please use the chat button. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Inshallah, it will sort it out hopefully in the coming classes. Next, Rabia.
Oh, hi. Hello, everyone. So I'm Ruby. Yeah, so my background is I did law, I don't know, 8 years ago, I think. So yeah, so my mind and my way of thinking is very much still very from that discipline. And then and then so like for the past 2 days, I've been like, my head has been having a bit of a culture shock learning literature, but it has been a lot of fun. And then I've been teaching at a learning center for the past 7 years. So yes, that's all.
Okay, Salim, do you want to type something about yourself in the chat? No, do you want to type something in the chat here? Do you know where the chat is? You don't? Okay, never mind. All right. Okay. My name is Raihana. I have been with UKM since 1995. That's a long time ago, before some of you even born. So that's how old I am. I'm ancient, I know. My primary area of research for my PhD was Malaysian literature and English. And then the last 12 years, since 2008, I've been working on Muslim diasporic writing, meaning writing by Muslim writers who are residing in non-Muslim countries. So they are minority Muslim writers, focusing primarily on Muslim women writers. So that's my main area. So my research as well as my supervision work has been on that. So coming to comparative literature, Shahira's work was, undergraduate was on creative works, right? So one thing that you can do in our course in comparative literature is to think about how writers from different cultures approach their creative work, approach the work of art. So this is something you can kind of like utilize. Ruby, you come from the discipline of law. You may want to speak to Dr. Anita because she also did, her first degree was also law. You want to look at discourse. You may want to look at text as a kind of a discourse rather than looking at it just as stories, characters, plots, whatever. So my hello? Salim? Sorry, Salim asked to join because he's already here, but I don't understand. He asked to join.
Maybe he's from another device. Maybe he's using a phone. Yes, he's using his phone. Yeah.
Can you say something, Salim?
Hello.
Hello.
Alhamdulillah. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you
Oh,
so
I'm
much.
so happy. I don't know why. Hi.
All right. Can you say something? Can you say something? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Salim?
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Salim Sadiq Haji. I'm from Iraq and originally from one of the cities of Iraq called Mosul. And it's the city of Nabiullah Yunus. I graduated from first Teacher Training Institute. Then I finished College of Education. After that, I got another bachelor degree in English, in fact, College of Art, University of Mosul. That's all about me. Thank you. And now I'm a teacher at one of the institutes of handicap in one of the cities of Iraq, which now Idhok,
Cool.
which is in the north of Iraq. Yeah, that's all about me. Thank you so much.
Brilliant, brilliant.
And you can
So
call me Salim only. Thank you.
So you got two undergraduate degrees.
I got one diploma plus 2 bachelor degrees in English language. One of them in literature and the first one was in education, and the second one was in literature, College of Art. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
So I like to know your backgrounds, your respective backgrounds, so that when you come to do your assignments, I will try to kind of encourage you based on your either your background or your interests. So you can tell me your interests. You know, maybe you are interested in women writers. Maybe you are looking at children's literature. Maybe you are looking at young adult literature. Maybe these are your interests. So what we can do is we can curate especially your final project to your respective interests. That way, there's two values there. Number one, you may publish that work. If it is original, you may publish the work. Number two, if that's your area of interest and you want to focus on your final thesis on that, you may develop that as well. Because when I did my master's, I did my MA here in UKM, not here at home, but in UKM. I did a master's in arts in English language studies. One of the papers that I set for was comparative literature. And one of the assignments of that became the literature review for my MA thesis. Okay, so I wrote my final thesis based on an interest that I had, and I wrote the final project assignment for comparative literature also based on the same interest. So if you kind of like think, you know, your foresight is strong, and you're like, okay, you know what, I'm interested in this particular area. For this assignment, for our course, let me know so I can kind of guide you into doing an assignment based on that. Then you can use that same material for your final research, for your thesis. Okay, so keep that at the back of your mind. So let's get started. I have sent you the materials for today's class.
Yes.
But before I forget, how many of you have registered for this course? It's still 4 now. So Donglai and Salim, you still have not been able to register into the course, huh?
Inshallah, today
Yes,
I will try to do
doctor.
my best to register.
I called the finance department. They asked me to wait. Yeah.
First of all, before I forget, if you have registered into our course, we have a learning management system where all your materials are given to you through this learning management system. So it's called UKM Folio, right? Once you have registered into the course, you will be able to access the materials in this course. So far, these are the people who have registered and they can access. Fuzla, Aimi, Ruby, and Shah. So whatever materials, whatever materials that I make available in this course, I've got a lot of them. I've hidden still quite a lot, right? Because I don't want to overwhelm you. You all look at the whole thing and then you're like, oh my God, I can't do this course, you know? So I'm going to kind of reel you in first, tease you a little bit. So for today's class, the materials are available on UKM Folio. The lecture note I've given that via WhatsApp. I've given that to you just now. Okay, so the lecture note is there in our WhatsApp group, and the course file is also there, right? So the course file is exactly, so whatever information that I have placed in our learning management system, I have made it available on our WhatsApp. So please check the WhatsApp if you have not registered on UKM Folio, so that it's easier for you to kind of follow the course. So let's just get started with our course file. So today's class, I'm just kind of giving you the big picture, giving you the overview what this course is about. If you can't follow, can you see the screen first of all? I didn't even ask you this. Are you all seeing
Yes,
this?
I am able to.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do I make this? All right, cool. All right. Very quickly, an overview about this course. First of all, it's called Parameters in Comparative Literature. Like, what does the word parameters mean? Okay. What does this word parameters mean? It will be a lot more clearer as I talk about the course generally, but the focus is on comparative literature, on the discipline of comparative literature. So very quickly, the synopsis of the course. This course examines contemporary notions of comparative literature. So this word contemporary, meaning it's 21st century. So, but in order to start looking at the contemporary notions of comparative literature, you need to know how comparative literature was viewed, last century, in the last millennia, in the 20th century. Right? So we're going to have a kind of a historical look into comparative literature, and then we're going to have a more contemporary perspective of comparative literature. And this contemporary perspective is not set in, it's not the Anglo-American base, but it's more of a global perspective. All right, which means comparative literature in the 20th century tends to be based on Anglo-American, British, European, and American schools of comparative literature. Next week's class will go into it in detail. But for our course, for this particular course, we are not using the definition of comparative literature based on Eurocentric or Anglo-American schools of thoughts. We're going to open it up and look at Chinese schools of comparative literature, Indian schools of comparative literature, even various other places in the world, Middle Eastern perspective, African perspective. So different schools of comparative literature will have their own variations. For instance, should the text be read in its original form, or can you read a text in translation for it to be considered comparative literature? One school of thought will say, no, you have to read it in original form for it to be considered comparative literature. But another school of comparative literature says, it's okay to read the text in translation. If I can't read a particular text in Arabic, for instance, if I can get a translated version, I can still use it for comparative literature, for research in comparative literature. So various schools of thoughts will help us define our understanding of the contemporary notions of comparative literature. Another aspect of this course that I want you to focus on is we will focus on bringing various disciplines from post-colonialism, postmodernism. We'll look at issues such as construction of cultures, gender roles in history, notions of race and ethnicity in different contexts, as well as histories of different post-colonial nations. So if you look at the course description, you will see overlaps with your other courses, Nations and Narration, your theory course, any other course that you're taking for this program, for our post-colonial literatures and English program. Whatever readings that you are doing there will help you with this particular course. Okay, and whatever readings you do here will also help with these other courses. That's why this course is compulsory. Okay, so finally, the course also provides you with the opportunity to conduct interdisciplinary research. I will explain what I mean by interdisciplinary. It's not like you have to go and learn another discipline, but the other discipline that we talk about is theory. You may use theories from sociology, from cultural studies, from media studies, right? From even law, from education. You may bring in theories from other disciplines in order to read a literature, a work of literature, a literary text. This is where interdisciplinary comes in. Okay, so these are some of the references. I just want you to have an overview of the learning outcomes, okay? Because I think before you begin a journey, you need to know what you hope to achieve at the end of the journey, right? When you have that in your subconscious mind, you are guided to achieve it. Whereas when you don't know what exactly you're going to achieve, you meander along the journey, but you don't really achieve the full scope of what this course can allow you. So there are 4 learning outcomes, and because we are graduate students, you know, I'm explaining this in detail so that you are able to kind of immerse yourself in the learning and be able to achieve these outcomes and some, not just these, but over and above these. Okay. The first is to demonstrate critical awareness of the history of comparative literature, the divergent schools of thoughts, and their fundamental differences. So as I said at the beginning, this course examines contemporary notion of comparative literature. So the first LO, if you like, helps you look at comparative literature is as a historical time, at a historical timeline. What is comparative literature in the 20th century? What is it now? What are the different schools of thoughts of comparative literature? You've got the European schools of comparative literature, the French school specifically. You've got the American schools of comparative literature. You'll understand the key differences. What's the difference between them? What's the similarities between them? So in this learning outcome, you will have to demonstrate through the assignment, you will have to demonstrate your understanding of it. When you are able to show me through your assignment, one of the assignment, I'll show you in a minute. When you are able to show me through your assignment that you have understood this learning outcome is achieved. That's how we evaluate the learning outcome. I'll take a break in about 10 minutes, okay? So I'm going to go through this first. The second learning outcome is you will be conducting a critical discussion on comparative literature using any 2 parameters. So that's the word again, parameters. Like, you know, you had the word at the title, now you have the word here again. Well, what's this parameter? Parameter is basically how you conduct comparative literature. What do you use, right, as a frame of reference to conduct comparative literature? The colored, any of you colored blind? Can you all see colors? Hello?
Yes, I can see that very clearly.
These, what colors are these? Huh?
Is it beige?
I know, right? So it's like, what color is that? Okay. So these yellow color topics, these are the parameters. Okay. So one parameter is national literature. So you're looking at 2 texts from 2 different national literatures, national literary canon. So American literature with Indian literature, or Chinese literature with Malaysian literature. You compare the 2 texts. That's one parameter. Okay. Another parameter is thematic concern. You use the same theme, maybe the theme of, give me a theme. Anyone?
Resistance?
Yeah.
Or freedom fighting?
Okay, so
Sure.
one theme is expressions of resistance for freedom. You take 2 texts from 2 different geographical contexts, one in Africa and one in India, and you compare them for that particular theme. So that's a second parameter, okay? So that's what parameters means. Parameters is basically the approach taken to conduct comparative literature. So you need to know the various possible parameters in order to achieve this learning outcome, in order to achieve LO2, where you have to conduct a critical discussion of comparative literature using any two parameters. So you will have two separate assignments for this. The third, LO, is also partly connected to one of your assignments. It's to conduct a critical and creative discussion of comparative literature using an interdisciplinary approach. So that's two parameters here. Interdisciplinary approach is the third parameter. Okay, so by the end of the course, you would have done an assignment which involves 3 parameters. You would learn a few more, but you would have done a critical work based on 3 parameters. And a final LO is basically connect the discussion of comparative literature to current issues. And the final project will do this for you. Okay, so I don't want comparative literature to be something that you talk about as something in the past, as something based on the 20th century focus. I want the concerns to be more current, right? And that's why we are taking a more global perspective. When you think about the global perspective, comparative literature is constantly evolving, right? The focus of the Anglo-American European schools and the concerns of the more Eastern schools of thoughts or comparative literature will definitely differ, especially with changes of time. Like Malaysia received its independence in 1957. Now, as an independent nation, as a modern state and moving towards a developed state, we have gone through a lot of changes. Our writers, our Malaysian writers in English, reflect the writings based on the things that the country is evolving. So how would you read Malaysian literature in English compared to Chinese literature in English? You must have more current approach to reading these texts. You can't use 20th century theoretical approach, right? So that's why the interdisciplinary domain is crucial. Don't worry if it sounds overwhelming. You have the recording later, and you have the WhatsApp to ask me questions. Just 5 more minutes before we take a break, and you can ask me questions. The course is based on your interest, but in order for the course to run well, you need access to a group of texts, and these texts that I have identified will be your set text. Your first text would be the collection of short stories, Other Voices, Other Vistas. I have already made it available on Google. I made it available on
Google Drive.
Google Drive here, the link. Some of you have already asked for it to access it this morning. So if you have trouble downloading it, maybe it's the version that you are not able to access because it's not PDF or whatever, go to this link. It's a free website. Go to this link and type in, and you should be able to access all these texts. So these texts are compulsory. You notice I have located where the text is based from, or rather the canon that the text is based is rooted in or centered in. So for instance, The Yellow Bird by Kevin Powers is an American literary canon. Canon there means the collection of texts. So American literary canon means this text is positioned within the American literature. The Corpse Washer by Sinan Antun is based on the Iraqi canon. The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas is based also on the American canon, but specifically on the African American canon, the minority canon. Born a Crime by Trevor Noah is a South African canon. the bamboo stalk. Now, this is something to keep a note of. San al-Sanusi's text is actually written originally in Arabic. So we are reading the translation of it, the translated text. But Salim, if you want to read the Arabic version, you are welcome to. Okay. So inshallah. So if you are able to get access to these texts and begin reading it, that would help in your coming weeks. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and take any questions that you may have. Got any questions for me?
I wonder when it comes to translation, right? Do we have like some sort of a consensus how different will the translated work be from the text? And is it reliable if you want to compare, those two?
Okay. Very good question, Ruby. Those are the kind of questions that the scholars in the discipline of comparative literature, especially in the 20th century, have debated about. And that is why the French School of Comparative Literature, I'll talk more next week, but the French School of Comparative Literature are adamant in a sense that they feel for you to be a student of comparative literature, you need to know more than 2 languages, at least 2, if not more, and you need to be very proficient in these 2 languages, right? And you have to read the text in its original form. So the French School of Comparative Literature basically does not encourage translation, does not encourage reading in its translated works. The American School of Comparative Literature allows for the translated text to be brought in. But some professors in the American School of Comparative Literature also subscribe to the French School of approach of comparative literature, okay? But within our perspective, within our context as in this course, we are not problematizing the extent to which the translation is the translation mirrors its original form. That's not the focus. Our parameter is thematic, all these other parameters that I highlighted in yellow in the course file just now, though that's our focus. If you were doing the elective something translation, Dr. Zalina offered it last semester. I think Fuzla, you did that course, right?
Yes, I did that course last
Was it called again? Not nations.
I think literary in translation.
Okay.
That's literary in translation.
Yeah, literature in translation or literary?
Literature in translation.
Okay, so if you, Ruby, in answer to your question, if you were doing literature in translation, or that particular course that Fuzla did last semester, that course will require you to do that kind of mechanics of analyzing the text in its original and then analyzing the translated text and then looking at the source text and target text and all the rest of that. Our course does not focus on this. Okay, any other questions? I need you to engage with whatever I am showing you for 2 reasons. Number 1, to wire it in your own mind in terms of learning, right? So in order to do that, every time somebody shows you something, be it myself or any of your classmates, I want you to engage with it, meaning look at it and then have questions. Write down whatever questions you may have. Write down whatever thoughts you may have. It could be a comment, it could be a question, it could be, wow, I like that text. I've been wanting to read that text. Or, oh, I know that guy. You know Trevor Noah, right? Do you know who Trevor Noah is? Right. So we get to read his memoir, So you may have watched the movie The Hate You Give and you're like, oh, I have not read the book. Okay, even if it's a simple comment like that, I want you to constantly be in the frame of mind of engagement. All right, as a lawyer, that wouldn't be a problem. I think Ruby's going to constantly engage, right? What I mean is we need to always be active in our class. Otherwise, it kind of, it can get quite overwhelming. All right. So I especially in this current virtual class that we're in. Okay. Any other questions?
Sorry,
Salim?
question, please.
Yes.
Okay. Are we going to study the textual theory, a theory which is, you know, for example, when I study a text, for example, a text like Joseph Andrews, in which he emphasized on the story of Nabiullah Yusuf. And here I made a comparison between three texts: the text from Bible, and the text from Quran, and the text from Henry Felde. So my question is, are we going to study things like that?
Okay, what you have described is using the discipline of theology, right? Yeah. To compare two scriptures, to compare the Quran with the Bible, right? That is a comparative literature. That is an approach called comparative literature. But the text that we are reading, we're not reading scriptures because theology is not one of the parameters. But if you want to use that for your final project, you can. And I can teach you how you can do that. So you can let me know if you are interested in something like that, because I'll show you the final assignment, the question for your final assignment, and you will see that, oh, I think I can approach that. I can already start to draft out my idea. Okay, so I'm going to tell you basically, I'm going to tell you your assignments. I'm going to tell you all the things you need to do. And if you are able to get it all done fast, you can finish this course as soon as you're done with all the assignments. So you don't need to wait until the end of the semester to start working on it. I would encourage you to start developing your interest now. Salim, does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
Great. Shah?
Hi, sorry. Just now you talk about like me personally with creative writing background. I can what was that?
When you think about creative writing, you're talking about producing literary work. You're not a consumer. Like I'm a consumer, I read text, right?
Yeah.
I'm not part of the production community, right? So when you do creative writing, your hat is very much as the producer of the literary work. So some questions you may think about is, what is my role as a writer? Do I write for myself? Do I write for a society? Do I write for a global audience? Do I write for my own community? So if I write for my own community, what language do I use? Can I use a Malaysian expression for my audience? So as a producer of a literary text, these are things you're thinking about, right? So take Salim and Alice, for instance. If they decide to produce a literary text in English, will they put words from their language into the literary text? Will they put expressions in, like Alice, will you say things like, "Saya ni," thank you. Will you put shukran, ahlan wa sahlan? Will you put these kinds of Arabic expressions? Even if your audience is global, they might not understand Mandarin and Arabic, or even Malay. You put things like la, the expressions la, or if you're from Penang, I'm from Penang. So you may put like the Penang words, instead of water, air, you say ayak kan, stuff like this. So as a creator or producer of literary text, your perspective of worldview of works of literature is different, because you know what it takes to produce. You know the kinds of things that you go through in your mind in order to produce. So Shah, you will look at literary text for instance, the short stories, you will read it and you think, what is the writer trying to do here? How did the writer achieve this? So you may look at two texts and look at the writer's approach of using humor, of using, when talk about resistance, Ruby was talking about resistance. You will read two texts in this course, The Hate You Give and Born a Crime, and both texts basically resist being marginalized and subjugated and domination from the majority society. But one uses a very emotional, physical kind of resistance. Another one uses humor, uses jokes, uses wit. So resistance does not need to come in a form of physical resistance, take arms or you riot. So as a writer, which one would you use to talk about, issues of resistance or issues of expressing wishing for freedom and demonstration and all this? So that's what I meant for you. So you bring that lens into your reading of the text. Does that help? Yeah, so keep asking me questions. Yeah, any other questions?
Oh, sorry,
Can I just
Doctor.
ask? Oh, sorry.
Just a second, Ruby. Just a second, Alice.
Before this class, I took a quick look at a short story you sent on in the Google Drive, and for Chinese stories, they are very classic stories, but they are
They're very what stories?
classic stories
Classic,
in
right.
China. Yeah, but they are also last century. Yeah, I
Yes.
think if I
Yes.
make a compare with Malaysia literature, can I use a story or novel near maybe 21st century? Yeah.
Very good question. Yes, because Alice has done Malaysian literature and English last semester, so you've got kind of points of reference. So I'm glad you brought up that these stories are from 20th century. These stories are classic, as you say, but in order to do comparative literature, there are certain things that we will kind of it's like a science experiment. So you're doing a science experiment. You need certain variables to be fixed, and then there are other variables that can be a bit more fluid. Okay. So for instance, in answer to Alice's question, if one of the variable is novels in the 20th century, that's the fixed one. The fluid one would be one is Chinese based and another one is Malaysian based. That is the fluid one. But if the Chinese base is novels in the 21st century, the Malaysian one is novels in the 20th century, there are too many variables that are fluid. When you do a research, you must have fixed as well as the fluid kind of variables, right? So if you choose a novel from the 21st century from the Chinese literature, you must also have novels from the Malaysian literature also in the 21st century. That way it's comparable, right? The fixed one is novels in the 21st century. The fluid variable, one is Chinese based in China, another one is Malaysian based. Does that answer your question, Alice?
Yes, doctor, because I remind myself of the last semester, I read something about Guide of the Evening Mist. Yeah, and I want to find a Chinese novel or something like that to compare with it.
Good. So you have already identified your final project. So Salim is already thinking of looking at one possible, and Alice, you've got The Garden of Evening Mist by Tan Tuan Eng, and you want to compare that with maybe a Chinese. Yeah, so you can see the Malaysian perspective, the Chinese characters, the Malaysian perspective, and you can see the Chinese perspective during the Japanese occupation. How was Chinese people in China affected by the Japanese in World War II. Brilliant. I love that. Any other question?
Oh, sorry. So I was just
Sorry,
that's
Ruby.
one more question. Yes.
Yep. Go ahead.
Because when you mention about consumption, I always perceive that I consume Malay novels written in Malay, or Malaysian novels written in Malay, and then I assume that it's different from Malaysian novels written in English. The way I perceive it. Hence, when we want to do comparative, do I now perceive it as belonging to the same, I don't know, same canon or same field? Or
Brilliant.
am I now not allowed to compare them against each other? It's just, yeah,
Okay.
I just want to make it clear.
Brilliant. In the coming weeks, we will cover that when we look at how is comparative literature within the national literature scope, how is it defined? But let me go ahead and answer Ruby's question. Ruby, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, cool, because the picture's a bit blurred. Okay.
Yeah.
The short answer is, the long answer will come in the coming weeks. The short answer is, all texts written by people of a particular geographical location will be
So they're like considered together.
will be placed in one location. Yeah, so will be seen as Malaysian canon. But in Malaysia, we have a separate definition. Writings in Malay is known as the national literature. Writings in any other language in Malaysia is known as vernacular literature.
Oh,
Yes.
that is interesting.
That's you as a lawyer, you may look it up. I forget which act, 1967 language
Yes,
act,
yes.
1967 or 70, I forget. Right?
Oh.
But it was after the 69 riot, the 13th May 1969, the bloody riots of 13th May 1969. This language act came into place where Malay culture, Malay language, and you know the language itself specifically was put as the primary or the national language of the country. So anything connected to it, the literature, the culture, became part of the national domain.
I see.
And anything else written by any Malaysian, doesn't matter whether you're Malay or you're a non-Malay, if you have written in any other languages, this is known as vernacular or sectional literature.
Hence, the English novels, no matter how much Malaysian the content is, it's considered vernacular as a category.
Yes, and it cannot, and these writers cannot be nominated for Sastrawan Negara, the national
and
laureate
also, if I'm not mistaken, there's the C Prize, and I've always wondered why we must submit Malay novels only.
Yes, so it doesn't matter. So in Malaysia, for Salim and for Alice, for your information, if in Malaysia, because Malaysia is a multicultural country, because I keep telling Alice that she comes to Malaysia, she has so much to experience, especially food and all the rest of it. You know, when you come to Malaysia, you will see that there are just a lot of different cultures and heritage in this country. Okay, we're very, very rich in that perspective. But the way literature is approached and language is approached, we have one language known as the national language, and because of that literature is known as the national literature. Doesn't matter whether you are Malay or non-Malay. If you write in Malay, your text falls within the domain of national literature.
Oh, that is very enlightening.
Yeah. But there, for those of you who do education, you will see that this is one way of managing multiculturalism. In parts of Africa, for instance, this is one way of managing multiculturalism, especially in education. Okay, moving on. Any other questions? Aimee and Fuzla, any questions?
Actually, I do want to come back to why the French, I suppose, is against the comparison in translation version. Is it because they fear that some sentences or some words may be lost in translation? For example, like there are certain words in Korea, if I'm not mistaken, the word han, it does not exist in any languages or in English. So maybe that's why they oppose to the comparison for translation version?
Yeah, I mean, there are many reasons for that, but one of which is also to make sure the text is read in the way the author has produced it. Back to what I was telling Shah just now. Ruby left.
It could be the connection, I think, because yeah, that was what happened to me.
Oh, okay. So in answer to Aimee's question, if you are the writer and you produce your work in Arabic or in Mandarin, but your readers who wants to read your text can't read your text in Arabic or Mandarin or even Malay, you may get somebody to translate it, right? But the works are not produced by you. Though the words that you use, the expressions, are not yours, are what the translators have considered it. Ruby, are you back? Okay. So
The net.
okay, good. So that's one of the reasons too. The French school kind of emphasizes on reading the text in its original form. Yeah. So, but other reasons for sure will be, whether or not, how many of you here read Harry Potter? Have read Harry Potter? Yeah. So Donglai's reading of Harry Potter. Donglai, did you read it in Arabic? Did you read it in Mandarin or in English?
I think half and half, yeah. Half Mandarin and half English.
Aimee, did you read it in English or in Malay?
I same, like at least I read half in BM and half in English.
You see, when you read a text in its original form, especially something like Harry Potter, if you read the first few pages, you can hear the humor, the very dry British humor, that comes across. But if you read it in Malay or in Chinese, I wonder to what extent the humor comes through. Do you feel the humor of the English culture? Because that's something it's an important characteristic. So Shah, as a writer, for instance, you look at the work of literature, you may look at those aspects, how the subtle things that the writers use in order to create the work of art. Do you understand? Okay. Fuzla, are you okay?
Yes. Okay.
All right, cool. So can I continue? Can I proceed?
Yes.
I'm gonna share the screen one more time. So like I said, these are the compulsory courses. These are the compulsory texts. So please make sure you get access to it. If you have problems downloading it, let me know. I'll try to help you out. So this is how the course will be structured. So we have 14 weeks altogether. The first 4 weeks of this course will be more on the what, the why of comparative literature. Looking at historical development of comparative literature, 20th century, the last 100 years or so. Okay. Next, the next few weeks after that, week 6 until weeks 14, you will look at the parameters. As I say, those bits in yellow, these are the parameters. So the first parameter is to consider texts from 2 different literary canon, from 2 different national literary canon. The choices that I have here would be the yellow bird and the corpse washer. Both are on the war on Iraq, the 21st century war on Iraq, okay? The yellow bird is from a American soldier's perspective, set in Iraq. Yellow bird is set in Iraq, okay? The corpse washer is from a Muslim Iraqi perspective of Iraq. So you see two different texts set in Iraq on the context of the war on Iraq by the Americans in the 21st century, but one is from an Iraqi perspective and another is from the American perspective. So these two texts, you will be reading them, you will be studying them in week 6 and 7, all right? Then the other parameters would be minority voices. The two texts that we'll be focusing on for that would be The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, the African-American writer, and Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, the South African writer. So both texts problematizes the idea, the issue of identity politics, specifically being minority, being an African-American for Angie Thomas, being a mixed blood South African by Trevor Noah. So in both cases, the characters are minority in their society. Angie Thomas's character in The Hate You Give, she is an African-American, which is a minority in America. And Trevor Noah is describing both being Black as well as being mixed. He doesn't call himself as Black, of course, because that concept is not available in South Africa. It's not a concept known in other parts of the world except in America. So, but in both contexts, both characters are minorities. So you will compare the American context with the South African context. And the next parameter is bicultural identity, okay? You will study, again, Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. So, you know, the same text can be read for two different parameters. And the next is The Bamboo Stalk by Azad Al-Sanusi. This story narrates the experience of a character called Jose or Isa, whose father is in Iraq, is a Kuwaiti Arab, and whose mother is a Filipino maid. You know, she marries the Kuwaiti man, and she gets pregnant and has a son, and the son has two names. His Muslim name is Isa, and his Christian name is Jose. So Bamboo Stalk talks about his struggle of being bicultural. So we're going to compare two perspectives of bicultural identity from the South African perspective and the Kuwaiti/Philippines perspective. But the writer is a Kuwaiti, so we're positioning this text within the Kuwaiti literary canon. So that's bicultural identity. For identity, for gender identities, you may use any of these stories from the short stories called Other Voices, Other Vistas, this collection that I showed you earlier. You may use the stories from there, or you may even use any of these texts. We may recycle them for the other parameters. Okay, so in between the bits in blue, the dark blue, these are your assignment dates. Your first assignment is a video essay in week 5. The next assignment will be a seminar in week 9, and your final project is due in week 17. I will also be having 2 workshop weeks as preparation for your assignment. In week 8, we will have workshop 1. In week 13, you will have workshop 2. Workshops means you come and see me individually for assignment consultation. So we don't have lectures in weeks 8 and weeks 13. We won't have lectures, but that that week will be used for consultations for your for your assignment. For week five, again, there will be no lecture. You will use that time to consult with me for your video essay, and the video essay will be due at the end of week 5. The assignment questions are already given to you, so I'm just going to go through it very quickly. The more times you read through it, the more your mind is preparing yourself for the task. So don't wait till the end, till the due date. So keep looking at it, keep reading it, keep circulating things, whatever questions you may have, and then you can talk to me. But I'm just going to go through it very quickly so that you have a sense of what you're required to do. You have, as I said, you have 3 key assignments. You've got video essay, you've got a seminar, and you have a final project. Okay? And then you also have e-task. Whatever task I ask you to do, whatever activities I ask you to do, there will be 5 altogether that you share during during class. They will comprise of, collectively, they will comprise of your 20% of your grade. So please complete them. That will be on UKM Folio. You'll have to go into UKM Folio for that. Please complete them by week 14 and you will be marked upon 20%. So your first assignment, which is due Friday morning, week 5. So this is week 1. So you have 4 more weeks for it to be due. And some of you are already thinking about it. You've already kind of asked questions based on these issues. So I'm glad to see that. So the question is this: using at least 3 critical essays on comparative literature, conduct a review of the discipline. Discuss the difference in perspectives between the Western schools and the Eastern schools of comparative literature. So when I say 3 critical essays, what I mean is journal papers, book chapters, even books on comparative literature. So the first assignment is basically the theory part of comparative literature. Okay, the second and the third assignment is more the application of comparative literature. So this discussion, you will do it in a form of a video. You have about 10 to 15 minutes. We'll talk more about how to do the video. If you don't know how, I'll send you some links. You can just Google it or check on YouTube how to make video essays. There are many guides there. But the focus of this video essay is on the definition of comparative literature, the methodology of comparative literature, and the current state of comparative literature. So if you answer all these 3 questions successfully, you would have achieved the first learning outcome, which is to demonstrate critical awareness of the history of comparative literature, the divergent schools of thought, and their fundamental differences. Okay, so I map the learning outcome with the assignment. So when you've done 1 assignment, you have achieved 1 learning outcome. The second assignment, it's more application based. It's more based on one of the parameters. So using any 2 texts set in 2 separate national canon, Arabic or Iraqi national literature and Malaysian national literature, or Iraqi national literature and British literature, something like that. Examine the above mentioned theme. The theme is comparative literature and national literary canon, convergence of theme or issues across national borders. So that's the theme. That's the same thing that you have to find, the convergence. You compare it from 2 different perspectives, from one literary canon against another. Define the converging theme in the two chosen corpus and consider how it is problematized across the two national borders. So Salim said just now, the story of Joseph or Prophet Yusuf from the biblical perspective and from the Islamic perspective, the Quranic perspective. So that's two different corpus, right? Looking at two different corpus based on the same theme or the same story. That is the story of Joseph. Maybe you want to focus on one aspect, on his growth into manhood, from his childhood to manhood. How is it portrayed in the Quran and how is it portrayed in the Bible? That would be one assignment that you could do. Alice talked about Tan Tuan Ing's The Garden of Evening Mist, okay, looking at perhaps the internment camp in Malaysia and how the Chinese Malayan were treated by the Japanese, and compare that with how the Chinese in China and mainland China were treated by the Japanese. So that's another issue across national borders. Okay, so that's one example. And that's due Friday, week 9, Friday morning, week 9. Final assignment, again, I come up with a theme, a very open-ended theme, comparative literature. Comparative literature and the art of storytelling. That's, oh, sorry, I forgot. These assignments carry a fifth of your final grade, 20%, okay, 20%. And the final project carries 40% of your assignment, all right? So the question is actually open-ended. It doesn't really have any specific rubric. The question is, this project requires you to delineate the notion of storytelling. How do writers tell stories, right? Storytelling as reflected in literary texts across time and space. Using any of the parameters studied this semester, any of the parameters, any of these yellow bits, you know, thematic, minority, bicultural, gender, national literary canon. So any of these parameters, using any of these parameters, conduct a comparative study across national and or linguistic borders and or different fields of arts using at least 2 relevant texts. And the reason I make this distinction between national linguistic borders, because you may read a text in 2 different languages. Salim may choose a text in Arabic compared to a text in English. That's 2 literary borders. Alice may look at a text in Mandarin and a text in English. The rest of you may look at a text in Malay or a text and compare it to a text in English. So if you do that, you are not just crossing national borders, but you are also crossing linguistic borders. Conversely, you may all choose to read texts in English. Then it would just be across national borders, not linguistic borders. Okay? So this project will be assessed for its explication and discussion of the chosen corpus and the methodology used. In addition, the project will also be assessed for its ability to remain current within the discipline of comparative literature. Just to tie it up a bit, this part of the assignment, the second part of the assignment, is actually taken up from here. It's taken up from your video essay. So whatever you do for your video essay, you can convert that into a Word form and will be part of the first part of your final project. What is the state of comparative literature in the 21st century? And then you approach the theme given, the art of storytelling. That is due week 17, which is the exam week, Friday morning also. Then on top of that, you will have 5 e-tasks. The reason I'm giving marks as 20% is because you will have to do work during class. I'll give you certain tasks. Then you will be you'll be sharing your thoughts in class. And I thought it would be sad if I don't give you any marks, for all the participation. This is basically a participation mark, class work, but you get a fifth of the marks for that. Okay, questions? Questions? Yes, Fuzla?
Sorry if I backtrack a bit. I want to ask if because literary canon is based on like a nation, right? For writers, for example, if the writers is Malaysian, but then they migrate to another country and they write from that country, then is their literature considered the literature of that country or the literature of their original country?
Yeah, you see, that's a very good question, because I think that's a question that a lot of scholars are also grappling with. Like, for instance, Shirley Lim. Shirley Lim is an Asian American. She was Malaysian, but she's now an American. I wouldn't consider her a Malaysian writer. She's diasporic, yes, but I wouldn't consider her a Malaysian writer, right? But then again, you have writers like writers with dual citizenship, British Pakistani, Mohsin Hamid, for instance, right? How would you consider them? Okay, so I'm gonna play it by ear. So say, for instance, you have a particular text that you are interested in. Let's talk about it and let's look at the writer and see whether or not we can position the writer within the parameter of comparative literature. If we cannot, then we have to kind of say, for the assignment given, you can't use this writer. Okay, so I take that idea of diasporic. Some writers may reside elsewhere, but they are still Malaysian. That's different, right? But if you are in America, and you are American citizen, you cannot consider yourself a Malaysian writer. You may write about Malaysia all you want, but if you're still an American citizen, your writing falls within the canon of American literature, not Malaysian literature. It would be minority American, but it will still be American literature. For instance, you may have Iraqi American writers writing fiction, but the text is not an Iraqi literature. It's an American literature, but minority American literature. Something like that. Does that answer the question, Fuzla?
Yes, that.
Yeah.
So for Khalid Hosseini, is he considered American? Like he's like the Kite Runner, and
yeah.
So that's American canon. Oh wow.
Yeah, not Afghan. Not Afghan.
I see. I just it's not a question, but just a comment that I didn't know how significant an author's citizenship is in deciding where their work belongs.
But within my research, this is outside our course. Within my research, I position them within Muslim diasporic writers. So then I can kind of I'm not a comparative literature scholar. I teach comparative literature, but my research is Muslim diaspora. So I would go in and out like that. So, like Khalid Hosseini or Randa Abdul Fattah or all these other writers, I kind of dip around, because it doesn't matter the geographical location, the operational definition of comparative literature doesn't matter then. Yeah.
Well, I always thought that the content itself should be considered, but I guess I understood wrongly that.
Yeah, because one of the key definition of comparative literature is the literary canon that the text is based on, or the text is placed in, and the literary canon is also based on the writer's nationality, right? So
say Salman Rushdie is British.
British.
Oh.
Like I was about to ask that because I think the book
Midnight's-
is Midnight's Children, because it's about India.
Oh my god.
So
Unless he's known as he's having dual citizenship.
if I Google, it's British Indian novelist. That's all in Google that I can find for now. But also,
But they always identify British Indian, British Pakistani and whatnot.
but he
some nations allow for dual citizenship, right? Some nations allow for dual citizenships. Malaysia doesn't. So
Yeah.
if you decide to have a citizenship in Australia, for instance, you have to relinquish your Malaysian passport. Yeah.
Okay, because he is like I think in Midnight's Children, it's all about India and how it.
But there are other writers in India that we need to get to know. So this is one reason why comparative literature creates this kind of parameters. Because for you to say that I have read an Indian writer or an Indian novel, do you read a diasporic work or do you read one that is written by the writer? So if Alice and Salim say, oh, I have read a Malaysian writer, and they quote you diasporic writers, these are not Malaysian writers, right? Same with other nations. So comparative literature celebrates writers of different nations. But of course, I take what Fuzla is asking, because now in the 21st century, one of the main concerns is migration, transnational movements, diasporic experiences of communities, not just migrations, but also, second generation minorities in different countries. We're not just migrating for work purposes anymore, or even for freedom and safety reasons, like refugees, but people have migrated and resided in different countries, and their children are now producing literary work. So they are the second generation migrant communities, right? So these are not diasporic individuals. These are not members of a community that keeps looking back to the homeland. They are actual members of the new society. Americans or Canadians or Australians or New Zealanders or whatever, So that's a very good question. Any other question?
Hi.
Go ahead.
Are there any criteria that we need to adhere when selecting literary texts for the final project? Maybe the length of the text, or maybe should it be the classics or the contemporary text?
Good question. In answer to the question, it will fall back on what you want to study the text for. Like Salim was talking about looking at the story of Joseph, right? If he wants to study the story of Joseph from the scriptures perspective, he will take there isn't a new version of the Quran or the Bible, right? So you have to use the classics, right? So there isn't a 21st century version, so you use the classics. But if Salim wants to compare the story of Joseph from the Quranic Muslim perspective with a theater production or the movie depiction, a Hollywood version, for instance, maybe the movie version is a 21st century version, right? And the Quranic version would be the classics, right? So on that note also, you can compare, for your final project, you can compare literary works with movies, stories, movies in that sense. So the story doesn't have to be written work. That's where the interdisciplinary aspect comes in also, okay? And it doesn't have to be just 2 texts. It can be even 3 if you want to, okay? So when you talk about the length, it's very much your choice. For instance, maybe Salim wants to look at the story of Joseph from the perspective of a literary text, the scripture, and a work of poetry, or even a work, even a song. You can. So the genre is completely up to you, whether you want to look at a theater production, a literary work, prose, short stories, poems, movies, we are looking at stories, how stories are compared with another story. But the definition of comparative literature is still the same. You want to compare two things, you must make sure one of the variable is fixed and the other variable is more fluid. Okay? The variable that is fixed will be the parameter. What is the theme? What is the issue that you want to compare the two texts for? Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Any other question?
Doctor,
Sorry,
sorry.
Yes, Alice first and then Salim.
sorry.
If I use two languages in my final essay, and I should put, for example, I use Mandarin, and I should put the original version, and I need to explain it in English. Is that right?
You will be the translator for me because I don't speak Mandarin. I don't read Mandarin, you know. So I will have to rely on you. That means you can use the original text, but underneath the text that you quote, you have to translate it into English. And the same with Salim. I read Arabic, but I don't understand much what I read, so it would have to be translated into English as well. Malay, I read and speak. So, any other question?
Yes, please.
Yes, Salim. Sorry.
Okay, so is this only applied on stories and novels? Can we apply that on poetry?
Yes, you can.
For example, let me say, there is a book has been written, so it's me, a collection of poems has been written by Nazar Qabbani, one of the famous poets in Lebanon. And the same collection has been translated into English. So can you make a comparison between the two?
No, because it's not two different literary canon. Both are the same text,
Yes, you are
right? So you cannot compare that. That will be known as comparative analysis, not comparative literature. For it to be seen as comparative literature, you must compare two texts from two different literary canon.
That's correct.
Okay?
Thank you.
No question though. Any other questions? How is the assignment? Is it manageable, you think? One video essay, one seminar, and one final project. Is it manageable?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, I think so.
I think I just have to go along with it as we learn more. We cannot really
True.
but I think like areas of interest, I think we kind of have a feel about it already.
Right. The reason these are the three assignments is because in order for us to gauge the learning outcome, we need to break it up like this. Because if we put all the learning outcome into one assignment, we will demand so much from you. It will be like 70% grade, which is too much. So we break it up so that one learning outcome, one assignment, another learning outcome, another assignment. That way it's easy for us to say, okay, which learning outcome is it that you are not able to achieve successfully? Then we can analyze it better that way. Alice, did you want to say something?
I think it's much like last semester. I think it's manageable.
Yeah. And I'm telling you all this in advance. So my strong recommendation, I know at the master's level, seriously, it can get quite overwhelming, especially when you're doing 4 subjects, you're doing 4 courses, because every course will require the same amount of reading, the same amount of independent research time from you, especially if you are working also as you are doing your studies. If you're not full-time student, if you're a full-time student, it shouldn't be a problem, But if you're not a full-time student, you might need to juggle your time. So my recommendation is every time you you have an idea, maybe have a journal if you're a journal kind of person, I don't know. But every time you have an idea about the assignment, either video essay or seminar or final project, put it down, jot it down. Keep these thoughts. And if you need to meet me on separately outside class time, I'm more than happy to do that. Don't wait until week 4. You may do that now, because if you structure your approach to your assignment slowly, you develop it slowly, you will be able to kind of meet the expectations of the course and exceed it. Not just meet it, but you will also be able to exceed it. But do it at your time. You know what I mean? Like, don't wait till the end. So say begin now. Like you're running a 10K, for instance. This is a 10K. This is not even a half marathon. So this is just 10K. So go slow, pace yourself, and then you will meet the deadlines. Can I move on? This is the last third of our session. So I for introduction to comparative literature, I kind of introduced it already as I was telling you about the structure of the course. So the first part, I have a lecture provided here in UKM Folio. So as I was saying before the rest of you joined, so far, Fuzla, Aimi, Ruby and Shah have registered the course. So Alice and Salim, your names are not in yet. Don't worry about it. Whatever I provide on UKM Folio, these things, I have also provided for you on your WhatsApp. Okay, so it's all in the WhatsApp. But your first e-task, if you remember, there are 20% e-task, right? You have 5 e-tasks. The first e-task is already on UKM Folio, and the e-task is this. Based on the discussion so far, identify the central difference between national literature and world literature. What's the difference? This is a concept, right? National literature, what does it mean? World literature, what does it mean? You have to answer this question in order to get your first e-task, in order to do your first e-task, okay? This one is due before the end of semester. It's not due today, it's due before the end of semester, okay? But let me just jump straight into the lecture. I'm just gonna go for another about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll do Q&A, and then we'll end the class. Okay, I don't want to make it too extensive, but around 2 hours is what our class will be like on average. So just basically, comparative literature, as I said, it's a discipline, all right? It's an approach. That's why you have capital C, you have capital L. You have undergraduate programs, master's programs, and even PhD programs named as comparative literature, programs of comparative literature. So it's got a kind of a structure and organization and a very strong, clear methodology. But I want to kind of just introduce you this idea of when we talk about comparative literature. What does it mean? How do we compare? So this is a kind of an important definition, Descartes' definition. It is, I take this quote, it is only by way of comparison that we know the truth precisely. All knowledge which is not obtained through the simple and pure intuition of an isolated thing is obtained by the comparison of 2 or more things among themselves. So right away, I'm going to go straight into the philosophy of it. Why do we compare? We compare to be able to ascertain more clearly the difference and similarities between something, and to maybe get a sense of the truth of the matter. So that's the philosophy of comparison. You know, why do we make comparison? Another aspect of comparison is, as this is a 20th century scholar, an important scholar of comparative literature, Henry Remarque, and 1961. It's a long time ago. So this is very much the 20th century school of comparative literature. Henry Remarque, for him, comparative literature is defined as the study of literature beyond the confines of one particular country. So if you're studying literature and you're studying literature, the writings of novelists, poets, playwrights of a particular country, be it America or Britain or whatever, that's not comparative literature. That is studying literature, but studying literature of that particular country. So comparative literature in its simplest form, the definition is to study literature beyond one country. You know, if you are studying literature beyond Malaysia and going into English nation of, literary text, or maybe even Iraqi, maybe even China and other parts of the world, that will get you started on the discipline of comparative literature. So go beyond the confines of a particular country and study the relationship between literature on one hand and other areas of knowledge and beliefs, such as arts. That is a definition of comparative literature according to Remarque. Okay? And Remarque also says it is the comparison of one literature with another, as well as with other arts, and the comparison of literature with other spheres of human expression. So comparative literature, according to Remarque in the 1960s, takes on these operational definition. So that's the definition that we had in the 1960s. So if I unpack that definition, if I break it down, deconstruct that definition, what are we looking at? We're looking at relationship between literatures, relationship between text and context, the geographical location from which the text is originating, as well as the relationship between literature and arts. So that's the focus of comparative literature. So if you change that to national literature, if you are studying Malaysian literature or Iraqi literature or British literature or American literature, some of you have done undergraduate courses in English language studies or even TESOL, you may have done some literature courses, right? Generally, it would be British literature, maybe even American literature, and then world literature, something like that. So British literature, you may have writers like Shakespeare, William Blake, maybe Jane Austen, maybe George Eliot, different writers of different generations thrown in, maybe a little bit of Virginia Woolf, something like that. But these are all texts within one context, within one geographical context. But comparative literature forces you to bridge that, or to go beyond one context and bridge with another context, okay? To take relationships between literatures. Literatures there meaning the canon, the literary canon. So between one literary canon with another, as well as between literature and arts. When we talk about arts, we're talking about other disciplines. We're talking about gender studies, media studies, psychology, study of the human mind. We're talking about maybe even religion, theology, right? So, or even science, right? Marine biology and stuff like this. So comparative literature focuses not just on literature, but also its relationship with other disciplines. So this video is made available on UKM Folio here. The history of comparative literature. So please watch it. Now let's go straight into a text. This is a short poem. So if you have your versions of the PowerPoint slides, please take it out. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to read this very short poem. And I want you, as you're reading it, I want you to jot down what other text that you think you can compare this poem with. It doesn't have to be within the domains of comparative literature, but any text that comes to mind as you're reading this poem. What other text? It can be a Chinese work, it can be an Arabic work, it can be something in Malay, any text at all. Just take 5 minutes to do that.
It must be from another literary canon?
That's why I say it doesn't have to be. So whatever text that comes to mind, just put it down. Just list down your text. I'm going to stop sharing, but I'm assuming you have the PowerPoint slides. Do you all have the PowerPoint slides? You don't?
No, I don't talk well.
All right. Okay. Then I will keep it open. So take 5 minutes. I'm gonna go and get something to drink. But take 5 minutes to read through it. As you're reading this poem, whatever ideas that comes to mind that you can compare with this text, write it down. Okay. Have you all read it?
Yes, Doctor.
All right. Can I have a volunteer who would like to read it out loud for me?
I can do it.
Go ahead.
All right. I too sing America. I am the Ducker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen. When company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table. When company comes, nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America.
Okay. Just a second. That's a very it's a very well-known poem. All right. Langston's I Too is a very well-known poem. Let me see. Can you hear the voice? Can you get the audio? Can you all get the audio?
Yes, doctor.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yes.
So this is from the movie The Great Debaters, in which the teacher, played by Denzel Washington, he comes in, he wants to inspire his student. He comes in and he recites this poem. So have a look at how the poem is recited, the nuances, or the you know, the way he delivers it, and how it
Start that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because I just finished reading a Toni Morrison novel the other day, so I'm going to start with that.
Which one?
Home.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the idea is you love a country that may be not treating you very well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and then Toni Morrison, there's also another novel that I read, Bitter Fruit. It's about the African Indian experience in South Africa.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, it's basically just being in a country that you love but may not treat you very well. So that is what I get.
Okay, good. Just a second, huh? Oh, for the love of God, move on. Just give me a second. No. Okay, sorry. Yeah, sorry, Ruby. So your collection is African American writers, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Who else?
Doctor, I think about the American writer Mark Twain. Yeah.
Mark Twain. Okay.
Life on the Mississippi and the Adventures of Tom Sawyer.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. I'm not even going to ask you what bits. You know, it's just as you're reading this, what comes to mind when you want to compare the text? You know, what other text comes to mind? So go ahead. Who else?
I think The Catcher in the Rye as well, because of the racism. Is that obvious, right?
Yeah. That's 8.
And also, I think kind of like the angst feeling it while you're reading it, and also while we're watching that film bit. Yeah.
Again.
I'm saying it reminds me of The Catcher in the Rye, also because of the racism, and also because the angst, like how it is, you know, presented in the class that like we watched just now.
Right. That's Aimee. Is that Aimee? Because I can't see your faces when I'm sharing the screen. Is that Aimee?
It's Shah.
Isha? Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
All right. Who else?
As I read this poem, I actually reminded of this one short story. I believe it's African American short story that I learned during degree years, where these African students are graduating, but the school actually brings black people that do well in sports, as if telling them that the only thing that black people are going to be good at is sports and nothing else. So like the short story explores how actually black people can do something more than just sports. So like the line of "nobody dare say to me eat in the kitchen," some sort of like telling me that they can be whatever they want to be without anyone ordering what they should be.
Right. So eat in the kitchen is a kind of a quote to you know, don't be seen, don't be heard, just move away, don't show yourself. Whereas what you are suggesting is that, you know, the African Americans are encouraged to be seen only in specific areas, maybe sports, maybe even entertainment, you know, music industry, but that's it. It's as if only these two areas are something that they are able to work on. So this notion of eat in the kitchen, yeah. Okay, good. Who is that? Is that
Aini.
Aimi? Okay, cool. Yes. Anybody else?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Go ahead, Salim.
Sorry, doctor. Okay, I
Yeah.
think the story is the poem is about an African American, and this is not his country, and he think that tomorrow he's going to sit in the kitchen, and he's going to be one of the members of the family, and not is going to eat in another place. So he will not be discriminated, with the other members of the family.
So what other texts?
I think he's feeling a kind of discrimination.
Yeah. So what other text comes to mind when you were reading this poem? This idea of discrimination, this idea of belonging, this idea of being part of a family. Is there any other text that you have read that has the same kind of theme or issue?
In fact, I have read a text from Arabic by a poet who has worked as he worked in the side of the family, but he was not one of the member of the family. He was just as a worker, what we call it. And he was working by a daily wage. So it was not his family, it was not his place, but he thought that in the future he's going to live in the same house and he will be the owner of the house. Yeah.
Okay, good. Next. Fuzla?
Yes. I think when I read the poem, the first poem that comes to mind is Maya Angelou's "Still I Rise."
Okay.
Which is also written by
African American.
Yeah, African American. And then there's this movie called Get Out. It's 2017 Get Out. It's kind of like a horror movie, but the central idea is about racism, and it's really scary. Yeah.
Okay, good. So what you have demonstrated, what I'm asking you all to consider when you're reading one text, and I'm asking you to consider other texts that you can compare it to, that is the start of doing comparative literature. The next thing you have to do is to ask yourself, what was it about this poem that helps me recall that other text that I have read, or that other movie, or that other poem that I have come across? What is the similarity between them? So you are finding the point of convergence between this text and the one that you already are familiar with in your mind. So this is how we begin developing the approach of comparative literature. Whatever text you are reading, always ask yourself, what can I compare this text to? What other text does this text echo? What are the issues in this text that those issues echo in another text that I remember reading? This is how you conduct comparative literature approach for our course, okay? Once you have looked at the text, then you have to ask yourself, does the text I'm thinking, does it belong in the same literary canon as this one? If it does, then I can't take that. If it doesn't, then I can consider. Okay, so reflect again on your list and ask yourself, does it fit the definition of comparative literature? If it doesn't, I want you to think of another text. Okay, you can go online, you can even Google. So Salim, you had an Arabic text. So that's definitely comparable. Okay, the rest, your texts tend to echo, your texts tend to fit within the same literary canon. Be it the writer, be it he's a white man, or with regards to Mark Twain, or Toni Morrison, an African American woman, or Maya Angelou, an African American writer poet. They are all from the same literary canon. So these texts cannot be compared. So I want you to think about another text. You know, we'll if we have time, we'll come back to it. So,
Doctor,
yes.
I already think about another text.
Go ahead.
It's a Chinese story by Lu Xun. He's a very famous writer in Chinese history, and the name is Mr. Fujino. Is a Japanese teacher of Lu Xun. The story is about his study medicine in Japan, and he received the discrimination by his Japanese student classmates, and but his teacher, Mr. Fujino, taught him to encourage and work hard to turn the expression of others, and then Lu Xun chose to come back to China to encourage more people to take. You know, that time the Chinese was called patient in Asian, which in
Chinese was called what?
Patient in Asian. I think in Chinese is 东亚病夫. It's like a patient. Yeah, it's not a healthy person. That's a kind of discrimination. Yeah.
So the stereotype, the label was patient.
Yeah, patient.
Spell?
P-A-T-I-E-N-T. The patient in hospital.
In a hospital. In a hospital.
Yeah. Because
so how is that?
we are not the Chinese in that time were closed and didn't have connection with other countries, and they are not developed, and so got some discrimination like that. Yeah.
So if we wanted to compare the text that Alice chose with this poem by Langston Hughes, one of the parameters would be, one possible approach is to look at the way the character is discriminated, marginalized, othered, stereotyped, right? The kind of labels that are being used. In this poem, the label is the darker brother. The word darker brother kind of marginalizes the character, the persona, from the rest of the society, like Salim says, from the rest of the family, right? In the poem in the text that Alice mentioned, another term was used to kind of marginalize a particular group of people. So it's Japanese, Chinese kind of a tension, right? The dynamics. In this context, Langston Hughes' poems, the context is white America with Black America. So the discrimination in both contexts is the point of convergence, is how the two poems can be compared. But the difference is one is in the African American experience and another one is in the Chinese experience. Okay, good.
Doctor, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry if I keep on coming back. Someone's usually Midnight Children. Yeah. Because it also reminds me of that the scene where some of the kids don't belong there, and that they can only appear if they are entertaining the guests. Yeah. So it kind of like reminds me of like
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can, you see, that's the beauty of doing comparative literature. You're constantly thinking of other texts that is comparable to this text, So text, as I said earlier, as Descartes says, it is because of the comparison that you are able to understand he talks about truth in this way. It's very philosophical, but you are able to see the beauty of the issue, or you can see the issue of discrimination in this case in all its shades of gray, not just the black and white part. So when you are able to compare one text to another, you can see the issue of discrimination from a more holistic perspective, not just from one society's perspective, in this case, the African American context. If you compare it to Midnight's Children, you can compare it to the Indian experience, right? How is discrimination, especially in the Indian context, is not just race-based, it's not even class-based, it's caste-based.
Yes,
So
caste-based.
the caste that you are born into will affect if you are from the lower caste, from upper caste. You cannot get a job, you cannot get a good education and get a job and then realize yourself to the upper caste. You cannot do that. It's not like a class. It's not like lower class and middle class and an upper class. It's not like that, right? So the caste system compared to the racism that is experienced here by the persona in Langston Hughes, for sure, yes, it's very much comparable. Good. Anyone else?
Well, yes. So I just realized that maybe how to say this. It was very hard for me just now to actually go beyond the African American experience, because I think we've always thought, okay, so this is about it. So when you actually asked, get another literary canon, I went, oh my God, what? So yeah, but then I'm not sure because it's the things that we read, but I was reminded of The White Tiger by Aravind Ardiga. It is this concept of this country not treating you well, but then you cannot escape. So I think India, in the society, they share that similarities. People who are marginalized are being like that.
Yeah, So you see, when the beauty of doing that, the beauty of forcing ourselves to look at a text from another literary canon is, after a while, you begin to see there are some universal themes that writers utilize in the creation of literary works. And discrimination is something that is quite universal. You see any literary canon, be it the Nigerian, the Kenyan, the South African, parts of parts of Africa, or even the Indian literary canon, or even the Australian literary canon, or even the Chinese literary canon. The theme of discrimination is universal, right? Writers utilize this in their work, in their craft, in telling their stories, okay? So that's what makes literature transcends culture and societies and even time. You can read a text set in the 18th century. If the text is also talking about discrimination, you may read it and you may understand, especially if you have experienced discrimination yourself. So the text speaks to you not because the writer is from your nationality or your background. The text speaks to you because the issue in the text converges with what you are concerned with, right? So comparative literature opens up our worldview that way. It tells us that you may read text from different perspective, from different national literary canon, but the issue is what matters. Okay? All right, so I'm going to move on. I don't want to take up too much of your time. There's a little bit more left. So earlier, if you remember, I gave you a definition of comparative literature by Henry Remarque in 1961. Okay, so that's like mid 20th century. Now, there's another definition of comparative literature. This is towards the end of the 20th century by Stephen Tuttosi, all right? This is his definition of comparative literature. Comparative literature means the knowledge of more than one national language and literature, and or it means the knowledge and application of other disciplines in and for the study of literature. And second, comparative literature has the ideology of the inclusion of the other, be it marginal literature in its several meanings of marginality, a genre, various text types. So I want you to kind of think about this definition, and we're going to deconstruct the definition a little bit. We're going to go deeper into what Totosi was saying towards the end of the 20th century. What is the definition of comparative literature? Look at the bits in red, okay? Those bits are kind of echoing what Henry Remarque defined in 1961. Here, this bits by Remarque, okay? This bits, what Totosi talks about echoes what Henry Remarque defined back in 1961, okay? But Totosi goes one step further. So it's not just comparing literature with other literatures or other national literatures, not just comparing literature with other disciplines, but it is also, this bits in green, the ideology of inclusion of the other, the marginal literatures, not the canon, the marginal literature. So bits like sectional literature, bits like literature written in English that is not considered world literature, or literature written that is not considered world literature. So when you think about world literature, it tends to be literature that is considered quote unquote great, or literature that has stood the test of time. So you have writers across, readers across the globe will consider these writers a set text when we talk about literature. Name me some writers who belong in the canon of world literature. Who would you think belong in the canon of world literature?
Tolstoy?
Tolstoy.
Does Shakespeare belong in this canon?
Maybe Shakespeare also. Shakespeare belongs in the English literary canon, yeah?
Khalil Gibran?
Gibran.
Who else?
Austen. Yeah.
Sorry?
Austen. Jane Austen.
Oh,
Jane Austen. So Shakespeare, Jane Austen, these will fall within the English literature canon. So the world literature canon tends to be anyone who is not in the English literary canon, but their works are read, their works are very well known in the world, quote unquote, in the world, right? So Gibran, for instance, the Lebanese writer. Who else did I hear just now?
Would you say Rumi?
Yeah.
Very
Yes.
famous among white people, Westerners.
The Persian poet, philosopher, Sufi poet, philosopher. Yes, Rumi, Tolstoy. So you mentioned Tolstoy, you mentioned Khalil Gibran, you mentioned Jalaluddin Rumi. These are writers who are not within the English literary canon. Shakespeare, Austen will be within the English literary canon. So they are not part of the world literature. So the world literature is basically writers outside the English literary canon that are well read, especially in the Western world, right? That are well known and well read, even well studied. Okay, but you notice the writers you've mentioned, they're all men.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Who else would you think fill that gap in world literature?
A Chinese writer called Mo Yan.
Is he well known and well read?
I think Mo Yan won the
Yeah.
Nobel a few years ago, but he's quite contemporary.
So that would be more contemporary writer. Good. So in order to fit into the world literature literary canon, this idea of world literature is very fluid. You know, different schools will have different literature programs, will have different idea of world literature, right? But it tends to be writers who have won awards, international awards, bestseller list, maybe even studied at the university. So for a long time, only the English writers are studied at the universities, are considered great. But after a while, even the scholars themselves felt that, you know, you cannot just keep studying your own writers. I'm talking about the Anglo-American school of comparative literature. They start to feel that you need to bring in texts from other national contexts. So that's where the definition of world literature came in. So they were like, okay, writers from China, writers from India, writers parts of the continent of Africa. Where do we put these writers? Yes, they are also part of the national canon of their country, but their writing is so, it's considered, you know, has reached a kind of station of literary production that it warrants a status in itself. Hence the definition of world literature. So whatever it's not part of your national canon, and it's you know, given the recognition by other parts of the world, it is seen as world literature. Okay, but this idea, this bit in yellow that I want to end this discussion with, what is wrong with it? What is the unsaid? What is the unsaid in Tutosi's definition? The ideology of inclusion of the other. What is wrong with this definition?
Like it's supposed to be exclusive?
Again?
Like it is supposed to be exclusive, according to him?
That it's supposed to be inclusive, but what is wrong with the way he is approaching the inclusivity? How is he including the other?
Well, by saying that he's including the others, he's actually labeling them as the others.
Right. So instead of saying they're one of us, it's exactly what it is exactly what Langston Hughes says. You know, so I'm not just a brother, I'm the darker brother. Just by putting that label, that descriptor, you have marginalized me. So I'm not the brother they send to the kitchen, I am the darker brother they send to the kitchen, right? So that connotation, the identity politics there, signals exclusion. It doesn't signal inclusion, right? Even though he says the ideology of inclusion, the word that he uses marginalizes people who write from other parts of the world. Okay, so but that's the state of comparative literature in the towards the end of the 20th century.
Sorry, Doctor, but I wonder, the way he defines things, does it have to do with maybe his background?
But he's part of the Anglo-American school of comparative literature. They're very much a Western-centric.
So for them, the other is very, okay, that's the other. It's very clear for them.
But the other is defined, basically the other includes us, you know,
Yeah.
Sunny and Alice and all of us, right? Writers and readers and scholars from other parts of the world, they're not based in Anglo-American, not the European, American and British schools of comparative literature, will be part of this inclusion of the other, right? But the way it is termed, it others us, it marginalizes us, it creates a kind of exclusivity of comparative literature. Okay, so what this definition is, when you talk about the other, there must be a center. So who is the center? Who gets to decide what goes into the center, and who gets to decide who are the others? Can we decide, we meaning scholars and students of comparative literature from outside the Western context, can we decide that our writers are part of the center, or are we necessarily stuck in this other othered positionality? So that's what's wrong with this definition. It doesn't open up to a more universal perspective. It creates a very much a narrow perspective of center and other, the post-colonial discussions of it. So what's the way forward? So as we end today's discussion, what's the way forward? So you cannot say the other, you can't bring in that exclusivity to make it inclusive, because it defeats the purpose. So Spivak, Gayatri Spivak problematizes this at the beginning of the 21st century. So she suggests something. Just as socialism at its best would persistently and repeatedly wrench capital away from capitalism, so must the new comparative literature persistently and repeatedly undermine and undo the definitive tendency of the dominant to appropriate the emergent. So Spivak is using the word emergent. Tuthosi is using the word other. Okay, in Tuthosi's definition, those writers, the new writings that are coming out from other parts of the world outside Anglo-American, the Western centers, these are known as the other. Spivak in 2003 problematizes it as the emergent. So at the end of the 20th century, the beginning of the 21st century, this is how comparative literature was seen. What kind of text do we bring in? Which texts fit into the discussion of comparative literature? Can writings by a Malaysian writer in the 21st century, can we study that as a comparative literature? Can writings by an Iraqi, a Lebanese, a Chinese writer in the 21st century that hasn't won awards, that hasn't gotten recognition by the world, quote unquote world, that hasn't reached the recognitions of the world bodies, of literature, can they be read and studied as part of comparative literature? Okay, so that's the problem with this discussion, that we feel that the particular literary works needs to be recognized before they can be studied and approached for comparative literature. But our approach is different. The approach that I am going to take is slightly different. Okay, my approach is, it is up to individual students and did I choose the wrong? Yeah. I'm just going to skip these. Okay, our approach is this, my approach in this course is this. We need to allow our students to decide which text they want to study, all right? And that those texts that they choose to study must comply with the fundamentals of comparative literature. You must compare texts from different geographical locations, written by writers from two different geographical contexts, okay? And you must compare them for something common, or there is a converging theme or issues that allows them to be compared. That should be the way we approach comparative literature, not whether the writer is a member of the world literature canon or the writer is a member of the English literature canon. It doesn't matter. Previously, you would have to compare an English text with other texts, meaning a writing from the English literary canon to be compared with other literary canon. But our approach tends to follow this scope. Devise programs of study which corresponds to what compels you the most, to the landscapes you most desire to understand and to inhabit. That's my approach, all right? So you tell me what you are interested in and how you want to study literature, and we will kind of explore that that approach. So it's not a traditional path, right? The more traditional scope of comparative literature would demand certain certain scope and focus. But what we are interested in is the new insights about writing, about culture, about history, about geography that you will be able to share with us based on your interests, based on the writers you're interested in, based on the novels, the works of literature that you are interested in. So that's basically how we will approach comparative literature. Okay, any questions?
Not so much a question, but just a comment that yes, thank you for using that approach, because I think the traditional approach that you mentioned, it is always mired by this power dynamics over the main literature, because I don't know, I think because in Malaysia we were educated in English, hence the way we think, the way we read, and then without realizing we have this hero worshipping.
Yes.
Yeah, so to do that, yeah. So I'm really thankful we're not doing that.
So we try to break the hegemony, that power dynamics that Ruby was talking about, by not subscribing to what Western schools of thought approaches comparative literature. We break away from that, right? But the fundamentals must be the same. So when I showed you I2, and you all had other texts in mind that could compare to it, you still have to ask yourself, are the texts I'm interested in, does it come from a different literary text, literary canon, or does it come from the same literary canon? If it comes from the same literary canon, you can't compare it to I2. It's as simple as that, right? So I'm not going to say, oh, the writer you have chosen is the writer award-winning? Has the writer been read extensively in the Western world? I'm not going to ask you those kind of questions. The writer can be a woman, it can be a man, the writer can be a Muslim, it can be a Christian, it can be an atheist. It doesn't matter. Those kinds of demographics does not come into play, right? Whether the writer has published, hundreds and thousands of copies, or has only done the first cycle of publication of his first novel or her first novel. It doesn't matter. As long as it's a published author, right? Now you may ask me, what about authors like Rupi Kaur who are published on Instagram? What about, what's her name? Gil. Two of my undergraduate students are studying these writers, Rupi Kaur and...
Is it another Insta poet?
Also an Instagram.
Is it Langley?
Yeah, it's either Langley or the guy.
Langley. The guy. Yeah, there's a guy also.
There's a guy, right?
Is it Ethicus? I'm not sure.
Gil, something Gil.
Maybe we've not come across that.
Yeah.
But what about those writers or writers? Sorry, Fuzla?
Nikita Gill.
Nikita Gill, good job. Yeah, Nikita. So what about these writers, right? Or stand-up or spoken word poet like Ruby Francisco. It's one of my favorite. Just a second.
Rudy Francisco. He's my favorite.
Francisco. Yes. What about those writers and poets? Would you consider them? And if so, another important question, if so, which canon do I put them in? Where do I fit these spoken writers or spoken poets, or where do I put these Instagram poets? That's something that we need to problematize. That is something that the definition of comparative literature needs to problematize, this 21st century definition. Because you may write and publish, but are you necessarily part of your literary canon of your country? That's another question that we need to problematize. There's no hard and fast rule, right? But you let me know what you're interested in, and then we will make sure that it is within the structure of comparative literature. The approach must be there. Okay, So it's been a little bit a longer class. I apologize for that, but I feel like we need to unpack the fundamentals, and then the coming weeks will be a lot easier for you. Okay, I'm going to quickly go around if you have any concerns right now, but later if you have questions, you may post it on the WhatsApp. So I'm going to go with Aimee first.
Doctor, actually, I want to come back to the poem. If I were to compare other texts, for example, if I'm taking the text from a Malaysian writer called Deep Fried Devils, which introduces the concept of discrimination through othering, but the point of view of the story is the Malaysians doing this discrimination by calling the Indonesia hawker as the other. So it's like a different point of view from the I2 poem. Could these two texts be compared, since it's from a different point of view, sharing a same theme?
Good. That's a very good question. So basically, the variable, both are fluid. One variable is it's a Malaysian text with an African American text. Another one is the perpetrator's perspective, and another one is the victim's perspective. It's also fluid, so you can't do that. You need to have one fixed variable. If it is on the victim's perspective, then take both texts looking at the victim's perspective. If it is from the perpetrator's perspective, both texts must be from the perpetrator's perspective. That way it's easier to compare. Because if there are too many moving variables or fluid variables, your data becomes too complex. It's a bit difficult to analyze. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. That means you might find another text that is also looking at the perpetrator's point of view, right? The dominant voice instead of the marginalized or the subaltern. Okay. Any other questions? Alice?
Doctor, can I compare with two movies? Because the Guide of Evening Mist has a movie version, and I really like it. Yeah.
And compare it to?
Yeah, I'm not sure which Chinese movies I want to compare with.
For your final assignment,
yeah,
comparative literature and the art of storytelling. So yes, you can use movies, but the parameter will still, the operational definition will still be applicable. The two movies must be set in two different geographical canon. Garden of Evening Mist must be considered as a Malaysian movie, and the other text must be considered as the movie from that nation. Then it would be like, if you take two Hollywood movies, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, I want to take Chinese movies about Japanese, maybe last century. Yeah, last century.
And yeah, you will still analyze the movie as a text. So you will look at the storyline, the characterization, and all that. So yeah, Ken. Thank you. Salim, any questions?
Okay, so just I thought about a poet, William Blake, and his very famous poem, "Say Nay, Say Nay for Shame."
Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright. Which one?
Yeah, Say Nay for Shame. So his story, a love story with Miss Anne, because William Blake was a courtier, and Miss Anne was in she loved King Henry, and the same story with Walada bint al-Mustakfi, and her love story with the poet Ibn Zaydun. So is it possible to make a comparison between the two stories, because both of the topics are the same?
Yep. Yes, you can.
And from different countries, different places, different geographical places, you know.
Yep. Yes, you can.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, you can. That's brilliant. Ruby?
Oh yes. Oh, I think I learned a lot for the past 2 hours and a half. I think I unpacked a lot of presumptions in my brain. But just sharing with you what I'm actually interested in. I've been thinking about this prior to registering. A sense of belonging and home. I plan to study Pesh Au, who's my favorite Malaysian writer. I have not found a work which I can compare it with. So most likely I'll explore in the Indian literature, maybe Kiran Desai, or people who are trying to escape from home but ended up returning home anyway. But the thing is, both Kiran Desai and Pesh Au are very well educated native writers. So even though I didn't intend for it to be so, but both writers represent some sort of an elite class within their own, in their background. If you have to look at it beyond their novels. But yeah, so how English speaking can I be, even in my reading choice? Yeah, so that's just my concern.
Okay, good choices. Shah?
Sorry if I'm a bit slow in this. Okay, so I was thinking of because Ren talked about like the Japanese, right? And then I also thought about Ambon, the film. Yeah, so I think I'll do something. I think I'll research more on that. But I'm not sure which and what yet. Okay, and I also have a question for the class, right? What do you suggest for us to read first?
Immediately, for I would say read a few of the short stories in this collection. And then before week 5, read the first two novels. What was it again?
Yellow Bird.
Read The Yellow Bird and The Corpse Washer.
Okay.
Our class, you cannot just read one text because it is comparative. So I would say read like Alice said, some of these Chinese writers in this collection are classic, right? Texts are considered classic. So skim through this collection. You have short stories from the continent of Africa. You have short stories from the Chinese literary canon, the Indian literary canon, Japanese literary canon, as well as from the continent of Latin America. So just skim, just read a couple of stories here and there. And as you're reading, ask yourself, what other texts can I compare these texts to? Okay, so the more text you have at your disposal, when I am introducing a parameter, it's easier for you to kind of dip into your canon of text that you have read, into your pool of writings that you have read. Even if you feel like Ruby was saying, maybe her writers are a little bit elitist, doesn't matter, you begin somewhere. But if you have not read extensively, then it's going to be an issue. Right? So if you have a list of texts that you are familiar with, then you can say, you pick and choose. Which one can I compare to for assignment 1 or assignment 2 or assignment 3? Assignment 1 is not literature based, but it's okay. But does that answer your question?
Yes.
I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting you all to tell me what you want to do for your final assignment. I'm not, in fact, seriously. I just want to know your thoughts, based on what I have said. I just want to know your thoughts. Finally, Fuzla?
Yes, so I was thinking of, for my final project, I was thinking of doing Angie Thomas, The Hate You Give, because it centers on racism and racial relations, right?
Say that again, I didn't hear that.
Oh, sorry. I'm thinking of using the text The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas and compare it with The Weight of Our Sky by Hannah Alkaf, because I'm pretty familiar with Hannah Alkaf's work and I've read Angie Thomas's work as well, and I think they are pretty comparable.
Okay.
And also both of the novels are also young adult novels.
Yes, the genre is the same. You're right. Yeah. Okay, cool. I mean, I like the fact that all of you are already thinking about your final output. I'm not expecting that. But the more you think about it, the easier it is for you to kind of develop your ideas and maybe even talk to me in advance and prepare yourself for it. Okay, so I will send you the recording of today's session. I will keep it on our YouTube channel, on my YouTube channel. I will share the link on the WhatsApp. But let me know, Ren and Salim, if you're having trouble registering, I will get in touch with Dr. Ravi to get his support as well. I hope by the end of this week, you'll be able to register and access our UKM folio.
Hopefully,
Okay.
inshallah, register.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah, just let us know. Ren, Alice, just let me know, okay, if you've got problems or what have you. All right, because my Palestinian PhD student was also having trouble because she paid, but somehow the money didn't get through, or I'm not sure what's the issue, and because of that, her registration is stalled. So just let me know. All right. So thank you so much for today's session. Go through the notes and keep thinking about these ideas and issues and start reading the corpus. Okay, let me know if you've got any problems with accessing the text through our WhatsApp, and then we'll follow along with whatever concerns you have. I will address them. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody, and take care.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Doctor.
Thank
Thank you,
Thank you.
Doctor.
Take care,
Bye,
everyone.
Dr. everyone. Bye.
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 Bye.